today is my May wrap-up video of all the books that I have read in May. Now, I am very surprised to say that I have managed to read 11 books, which I am super proud of myself. I set myself a goal of 10 books, which I thought was a bit of a stretch, but then I managed to read 11, so go me. High five to myself. So kicking off, the first book I ever finished this month was Northern Lights. Push. I wasn't a huge fan of Northern Lights. I think it was very much it's a very well written book and the story is very interesting, but there was something about maybe the way it was written for me as I was reading it, but I just didn't get on with the book. I found it quite slow even during its exciting points. When things were happening, I very much was just kind of reading it to read it. It's not a bad book by any standpoint, but I really didn't enjoy reading it that much. That being said, I still would recommend it if someone hadn't read it, because it's one of those books I think you either absolutely love it or maybe you're just kind of meh on it. I haven't really read many reviews on Goodreads where anyone's like actually hated the book. I just think either you're kind of meh about it or you honestly really enjoy it. So, Northern Lights is a very interesting book with the lore that's behind it, and I definitely will push myself through the trilogy at some point. Maybe in a couple of months I'll try reading the first book and maybe it'll grab me that time. But as it stands, I wasn't captivated by the book, and there's so many more books that I really want to read right now, so I'm just kind of putting it on the back burner for a bit before I kind of either progress with the story or reread the first book and then continue with it. The second book that I read this month I was highly surprised on was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This was my very first ever romance. I hadn't read any romance before this, and I had my expectations. What those expectations were, though, it's very hard for me to describe, apart from I think it was very much more classic old people romance that I was expecting. This book, really, I was laughing at points. I thought the characters' reactions were quite natural, and the story itself was it was a fun read. It was definitely not what I'm used to reading, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. So if you are into romances, are very light-hearted, I honestly just really enjoyed the book, and I do recommend, if it's something I do recommend if romance is something that you enjoy, or if you're unsure about romance, I'd say it's a very good entry level book. It has a love to hate relationship in it. Love to hate to love relationship in it, if that is something that floats your boat. Moving on, Cinder. This book right here, I didn't know what to expect. I knew most of these books that I read I know very little on, because I don't want to be spoiled on it, but I would say, considering the book's name's Cinder, my only criticism is that it's not as much of the kind of fairy tale as I expected. That being said, I'm sure if someone did even the slightest bit of research in the book, they would know that it was a sci-fi with cyborgs. I did not. Was not expecting that, so that was a very fun surprise that I got to experience, and it was very interesting watching the internal struggle of our main character Cinder. I'm definitely looking forward to reading the sequel, which I will be doing this month, June, which I will be doing in June. Stay tuned for my TBR, by the way, that'll be tomorrow's video. And yeah, I would highly recommend Cinder too, for if you are umming and ahhing about reading it, or if you haven't read it and haven't heard of it, I highly recommend the book. The next book I finished and I loved this book so much, for completely different reasons, was Mort by Terry Pratchett. This is me starting at the earlier Discworld novels. I'm kind of picking and choosing which ones I read before I read them, fill in the blanks with the others. This is more like my family's recommendations that I'm going through, so it's kind of a picky choosy kind of way, but the character Death I love so much. I find him so funny, and the way he reacts in the world is just brilliant. All the characters, actually, I just really enjoyed reading. The story is, it didn't It didn't turn out the way I was expecting it to, and it was still very enjoyable. I'm really looking forward to the next book I read, which has death and those guys all in it. I gave it a 5 stars on Goodreads because it was such an amazing read, and it was so fun. And if you are umming and ahhing about Terry Pratchett, or you want to try an absurdism kind of story, I think it's a very good entry. I'm just jumping in, and I've so far been absolutely loving it, so I do recommend Mort. The next book I finished, and I was thoroughly surprised. Not surprised, because I think it's wrong to say. It's Howls Moving Castle. I've seen the movie, and I loved the movie. And reading the book, I didn't know quite what to expect, because I've had some people say that they found it quite difficult to read the book. I flew through it. I loved the narration from like the book. I thought it was an amazing story. The extra bits I got from reading the extra bits I got from reading it rather than watching the film, I kind of had my ideas of what they all looked like, and Calcifer is just number one. His character is brilliant. If you haven't read it, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's an incredibly fun read. I think the world is really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading the second book as well. I forgot I had so many sequels in this reading list that I haven't kind of pushed to my next June, so maybe June's TBR is going to be much bigger than this one. And will I read them all? I have no idea, but that'll be fun to try. Moving on. The next book, because I'm way past the second, the next book I read and finished was The Magic Thief, which is a series I read quite a few years ago, and I loved. It was something my grandma recommended to me. It's just a very fun story. I think it's more middle grade kind of territory, but it's very fun and lighthearted. Lighthearted? I don't know if lighthearted's the right word. It's compared to something like Mort and Cinder, and compared to some of the other books I read, I definitely think this is more of a younger audience, but it's still such a fun book. Con as a main character, I love him so much. He's just a very fun main character, and you know, the way he thinks is very interesting. The way he interacts with the world, and you see his development throughout the book, is very heartwarming, I think is the best way. You feel for him with some of the struggles he puts through, and I'm very excited to read the second book. It's a old favourite. I do recommend, especially if you like the kind of more not serious wizardry books. Wizards are prominent in the book. I mean, it's called The Magic Thief, but I think if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. If you have heard of it and you're always umming and ahhing about it, still recommend it. If you don't want to read it, I still recommend it. The next book I read this month was from, as it stands, my favourite author, because she wrote my favourite series, which is kind of the Tales of Ixia, which is Poison Study. I will be reading that at some point, maybe sooner rather than later. We'll see. There's so many books I need to read. But Navigating the Stars is her sci-fi book that I was always curious about, but I never had the courage to read. Don't ask me why. We went through this in my earlier video of how I am just weird with starting new books, and thanks to you guys, and I say you guys, thanks to this channel, also you guys, don't really think I'm not. Anyway, I'm pushing myself to read new books and more books, so, rather than reading just the same books over and over again. So reading this book was amazing. I really love Maria V. Schneider as a author. I think she's absolutely brilliant, and the way this book progressed, I was not expecting. The outcome I was not expecting, and I'm very excited to read the sequel, which I'll be doing soon. If you hadn't guessed, I highly recommend it. Next book was A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I'm I don't know what to think. Not in regards of A Court of Thorn and Roses. I've really enjoyed the book. It's more Sarah J. Maas as an author. I've heard so much mixed thoughts on her online, and honestly, I don't really know why. I haven't really done much research on her, but her A Court of Thorn and Roses, I really enjoyed the story. I gave it 4 stars, I think. I'm being very inconsistent with telling on what rating I gave what book, but I really enjoyed the story, and I guess I wasn't expecting it to. I read Crescent City last month, and that was her adult fantasy, so thinking of going to young adult. I was surprised though with the young adult having sexual scenes in it, I guess, because it was young adult. I think young adult it's that difficult category. Do you mean like 16, 17, 18, 19, or do you mean like 13, 14, 15? I think it's definitely different age ranges, I guess. I really enjoyed the way that story went. The way it kind of ended, that the last like 200 pages, I did not expect at all, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The moments in the romance was kind of like, yeah, I mean, the overall story though was just really fun to read, so I rated it quite highly, and I'm enjoying Sarah J. Maas as an author. I still am planning on reading her very first series, which I think is Throne of Glass, either next month or the month after. But as it stands, I'm a Sarah J. Maas fan, and if I don't understand why people, I mean, I guess it's all personal preference, but as it stands, I'm go Sarah J. Maas. So I finished the Inheritance cycle, and the ending was okay. I have a plan for a full kind of breakdown video, because out of the entire series, would I read it again? No. I really enjoyed the first book, but as the story progressed, there was elements I just got incredibly bored over, in all honesty. I think there was, I'll go into full details, I don't want to spoil anything in the book. So as it stands, the ending was, I think, it was a logical ending, but a bit, not disappointing, but just like, oh, that was sad, I guess. Not sad as in that's sad, just as in it was an emotional sad ending. But I can understand it, so I'm not angry with it. Does that make sense? Whereas the entire series as a whole, I have my thoughts. You'll know them eventually, whenever I end up making the video. And I'll probably leave it at that for now. I finished The Well of Ascension, which, holy fuck, that ending, I want to talk about it so much, but I don't want to spoil it in this video. So all I can say is, I was not expecting that at all. I am so excited to read Hero of Ages, and I will be doing so very soon, because I need to know what happens next. Brandon Sanderson as an author, when I first kind of came into starting reading again, he was someone that was constantly kind of recommended, especially in fantasy, and he was like he's a big name in fantasy, so there's so much of his stories I also need to catch up on. I'm going to try and read one series at a time, so at the moment I'm focusing on the kind of Mistborn trilogy, and probably also the 2 or 3 extra books he's done as well. But his characterization, the stories he tells, the worlds he builds are absolutely fantastic. It's so captivating, and whereas I'd say The Final Empire was much more action-packed, the Hero of Ages, with the character development and the story development, and especially that ending, just blew my mind. So thank you for creating this work of amazingness, Brandon Sanderson. If you ever watch this, hi, big fan. And I'm very excited to read The Hero of Ages. And the last book that I didn't expect to read, that I am now reading, because I am going to be doing a bit of a series on this, is I'm rereading Twilight. I loved this as a kid, I'm not going to lie. I was very much a Twilight girl when I was a young teenager, and I went to see all the movies, I read all the books. Apart from Life and Death, I've never actually read that, so that's going to be interesting. But I have been reading this book, and there are things that I need to talk about because they upset me in a problematic kind of sense. I'll do not a long video, but just a kind of a bit of a mini rant video, maybe a major rant video on my problems with this book. I still will always have a place in my heart for it because I grew up with it. I've always enjoyed the stories. There's just some things that I think need to be said about it, and I think I'm hoping that as I read more, like, I will see the progress that it has done in fiction in what, say, not to do. I don't want to sound too harsh. I do. Would I I don't know if I'd ever reread it again. But as the new book, Midnight Sun, is coming out, that's the reason why I'm reading this, just because of that element of me that was a Twilight girl. But that is my wrap-up. I believe that is all of my 11 books that I've read this month. And I look forward to seeing you guys in my TBR coming up. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any video suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment down below. What was your kind of books did you read this month? Let me know what you thought of them. I'm very interested to know, and always looking out for more book recommendations. But with that being said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.